Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're having a great day so far, and welcome to today's video, which is the much requested foundation roundup, foundation summary. I'm not sure I can really give you a ranking, but I will certainly try to point out the best and my favorites of the bunch. So we have a few new foundation releases that I'm going to talk about in today's video, and I'm going to also be comparing them and talking about preferences when it comes to my absolute favorite foundations you guys know I've loved and I've been talking about a lot over the past year, my favorites, and then some newcomers and where they kind of sit in amongst those already known and loved foundations. So the foundations I'm going to talk about today, the newest of the lot, are the Chanel No1 and the Charlotte Tilbury. Those are kind of the hot newcomers on the block. We're also going to be talking about the Lisa Eldridge, which is still a relatively new foundation, and the CDP Cream, again also a relatively new foundation. And then the oldies but goldies that we're going to compare these newcomers to are, of course, my Tom Ford shade Illuminate, the CDP Natural Radiant Fluid Foundation Natural, the Shiseido Radiant Lifting, and the Estee Lauder Futurist. So these are the foundations that I'm going to talk to you guys about today. We're going to talk preferences. We're going to talk about which one is for you, which one I think is the best in each of the different varieties, and where these newcomers sit. So without further ado, let's get started. So as I said, I don't think I'm going to do a full ranking of these foundations, just because I sometimes think ranking videos make sense for me in certain situations. So I can rank eyeshadow palettes, I can rank mascaras, I can rank concealers, I can rank things a lot of the time. And if in 3 months' time, I might be able to rank these foundations, but it takes me such a long time to actually make a very fixed ranking that I'm happy with, that I feel is going to stay in that ranking for the foreseeable future. Rankings take time for me. I need to go back and forth a lot. And in order to rank these 8 foundations, I need to wear, these two back to back to work out where they sit. Then I'd need to wear these two back to back, and then these two back to back, and then we go on. And so you can see it will take months for me to work out my ranking of all these foundations and for me to be certain about it. Sometimes I'm 100% sure. For example, I could absolutely tell you that I prefer the Charlotte Tilbury to the Estee Lauder, and I could tell you that I prefer the Lisa Eldridge to the Shiseido Radiant Lifting, but I couldn't necessarily tell you which of my favorites and which the exact order would be of these 5. This is the problem. It takes me a very, very long time to really put things in an order. And I feel like if I do that at this point, I'm just going to be kind of guessing and making it up and putting them in an order for the sake of calling this a ranking video. So I think at this point, what's more useful is to tell you about each of these foundations, tell you the pros and the cons, what I like and love, and tell you the issues that I found, if any, with each of these foundations. So let's get started with the Estee Lauder Futurist Hydra Rescue Foundation. This is one that definitely isn't any longer in my top 5 foundations, and it's because of one specific thing that I don't like about it, and that's the way it sits on the forehead. Doesn't look good. It's not terrible. What's going on? It's not terrible. It's just, it does accentuate my forehead lines, the lines in the center of my forehead, worse than any of the other foundations I'm going to talk about today. None of these other foundations create that issue. Some of these foundations are actually very flattering and smoothing on my forehead, and some, they just look how they look. This one makes them look worse than they usually do, which is a shame because the finish is gorgeous. Such a glowy, luminous, fresh lush, juicy skin. That's what I love. I love that juicy skin like a peach. And that's what this gives me, a medium coverage. It wears beautifully. It doesn't get super oily or shiny by the end of the day. It's just gorgeous on the skin. It's very, very beautiful everywhere apart from my forehead, which is disappointing. It does have a very high SPF in it, which I could also do without. It's annoying how many foundations on this list have a very high SPF in them. Very irritating, because for lots of people that means they just can't use them, and for me it means I wouldn't trust them of an evening, because if someone's going to take a photo under flash, it could look bonkers. So for me, I'd much rather not have SPF in my foundation. I don't know anyone's really like relying on SPF in makeup products, so we all could do without it. Stop doing it, please, for the heaven's sake. But the undertones, the shades of this foundation, the packaging, lots and lots of pros, but definitely one con for me. Lots of people wanted to know the comparisons between these two, and I think that's based on a few things. One, they look identical. Two, they have a lot of similar claims. So they're both claimed to be like hydrating, medium coverage, luminous, glowy finish. So I understand it. I much prefer, it's a no-brainer. Charlotte Tilbury all day for me. I prefer it. Looks much better on my forehead and has no SPF in it. So I can wear this in the evening, which is like a revelation to me, because there's so many of my foundations that I love, looking on this table down here, that have like 40, 50 SPF, so I couldn't wear them to go out. And I want a glowy, luminous skin in the evening too, okay? Do people not know about this? I like to look glowy at all hours of the day. A glowy, luminous finish is what I want, and it seems like 99% of the foundations that have this medium coverage, glowy, luminous, natural skin have a huge big whack of SPF in it, which means can't wear it on your wedding day, can't wear it of an evening, can't wear it if you're going out with the girls and you want to take a photo that you won't look like Ghostface Mary in. It rules it out, but this one does not, and this is such a beautiful foundation. This is the Charlotte Tilbury Beautiful Skin, if I didn't actually mention the name. What's going on? But this gives me that medium coverage, that juicy, glowy, dewy skin that I am obsessed with. It wears really nicely. It has beautiful undertones. Again, the foundation, very, very nice for me. I like the packaging and I find it very flattering. Again, on my forehead, on my textured areas, it just looks fresh, healthy, smooth, glowy. It does take a long time to like set down. It stays like tacky for a long time. And I also noticed that when I first apply this, each time I'm a bit like, what's going on? It can look a bit like it's sitting on top of the skin initially, and then as I'm doing the rest of my makeup, magic happens. It just settles into the skin, and like over the time that I'm just kind of doing my cheek products, getting ready, by the time I'm finished doing my makeup, it's like it's taken on this glorious goddess skin. It's such a beautiful foundation. Absolutely love it. May well be like gazumping some of my favorites that are down on this desk, because it doesn't have SPF in it. It just makes it so much more versatile. There's nothing I don't like about this. And set, if you a light dusting of powder, this foundation just looks stunning. It just doesn't get too shiny throughout the day. I don't have to set it, but if I do, it almost makes it even just more beautiful, because it kind of gives it a perfected set appearance to the glow. There's not many foundations that I love to set, but this one I really like to set, because one, it just speeds up the process of it sort of drying down and setting itself, and two, it just really seems to give this a perfected boost to the finish, and it's glorious. And that will of course make it a bit more transfer proof. It will make it wear longer. It's beautiful, especially when set. Next up, let's talk about the Shiseido Radiant Lifting Foundation. Been a favorite of mine for a very long time. Beautiful foundation. Now, this has a more full coverage than the others that we've spoken about so far. Definitely looks more like full beat, definitely gives more of a makeup look to the skin than these two do. These are a lot more natural. This one is a lot more full glam. Like if I want to go full beat, full glam, this is like, it's hard to like tone down. These are like, you know, you can get a light coverage with these. This one, it's going to go on straight out the bat with like a medium to full, and very quickly will give you a full coverage look, which there's a time and a place. I have times and places for it. This gives me a perfected, very smooth, flawless, luminous finish. It's definitely more of a satin at first than these, and I find it gets glowier throughout the day, but not like it looks shiny. It doesn't ever get too much or oily looking or greasy looking. It just, after a few hours, I like this more because it just seems to take on more of a luminosity throughout the day. And it's one of these where I initially apply it and I'm like, I like it, and then give it a couple hours and I, you know, pass a mirror in the bathroom and I'm like, okay, now we're talking. It just seems to get better and better. It takes on more of a luminosity to the skin, which I love. It's definitely more of a I'm going full out today than some of these foundations because of the extra full coverage. And again, with the very high SPF 30 in here. I wish it wasn't there, but it is. Again, beautiful shades and undertones from Shiseido. They have great shades, great tones for me, winter and summer. Such a great foundation. Next up, let's talk about the Radiant Cream foundation from Clé de Peau. Now, this is a high coverage. You get a much smaller fill amount in here. It's only 21 mils, a very stingy fill size, really, really stingy. Average foundation fill size is 30 mil. A lot of the time these days they give us a 35, a 40 even, especially more so in tinted moisturizers, you'll get a larger fill size. 21 is very small and stingy. That's a very big negative when it comes to this one. It has a high coverage off the bat and you don't need a lot. It is that cream foundation, so that's how they're justifying the fill amount. I still feel like you use a decent amount of this to get a full beat cut, like high coverage. You still need a pretty average amount. I don't think it's a small enough amount that you're using to justify the very, very small fill size. Let's say that. I think it should be at least a 30 mil. Like all other foundations, you don't use like a dot and it does your whole face. I use a pretty average amount of this, but it is a high coverage, luminous foundation. It doesn't wear amazingly on its own, but when set it does wear beautifully for a solid 8 hours. Again, it has a 25 SPF, and again it is a very like made up full beat look, much like the Shiseido. It's a very perfecting, very flattering, very smooth luminosity. I'd say the Shiseido is a little glowier than this one throughout the day. Maybe this one, they start off about the same, but the Shiseido gets a bit more luminous, as I said, throughout the day. I would definitely recommend the Shiseido over the Clé de Peau because the price point is just so much more reasonable and you're getting almost 10 more mils. And I don't think there's enough of a difference between the two. They both are going to give you a full beat, full coverage, luminous, gorgeous, angel skin, luminous, plump, smooth look. And for the similarity between the two, save yourself £80 and get twice as much. So that brings me on to the Clé de Peau Radiant Fluid Foundation Natural. I've had several people say, oh, I'm going to pick up this foundation, the Radiant Fluid Foundation Matte that you love, that you talk about. That is not the right one. It really scares me every time because I see people saying, oh, I just picked up this foundation, and they're talking about the matte version, and that's not the same one. There are two of these foundations. There's a Radiant Fluid Foundation Natural that I love, and a Radiant Fluid Foundation Matte, which I think is a great matte foundation, but it's not the one that I love and that I use all the time. It's the Radiant Fluid Foundation Natural that you want to look for. So this is a more buildable foundation. This starts off as a medium, but you can get to a full very easily. It has SPF 25 in it. Again, quite a bit of SPF. Again, not so evening friendly, not so flash photography friendly, But this does wear very well and it doesn't need setting. It gives a very smooth luminosity. It's so flattering and it gives you such a healthy glow. I think this is a little smoother and glowier than the Shiseido. I do prefer the Clé de Peau over the Shiseido. Obviously, there's a vast price difference, so there's that, but the Clé de Peau, I mean, it definitely just edges it for me as far as the finish, as far as just the perfected nature of it. It almost looks set but with no powder needed, and it does wear incredibly well. It's just a bit more natural, having that more buildable coverage as well than the Shiseido. When you compare the Clé de Peau to, say, the Charlotte Tilbury, obviously this one has no SPF, this one does, glass bottle, and then a pump tube. There are some differences as far as like the mechanics. The finish is, I'd say, similar. Maybe the Charlotte Tilbury is a little glowier and there's definitely less coverage from the Charlotte Tilbury. The Charlotte Tilbury is going to give you a light to medium. The Clé de Peau is going to give you a medium to full. So that's the biggest difference. I'm not 100% sure which one of these two to tell you I prefer at this stage. I still need to do some more trial and error, but having no SPF in the Charlotte Tilbury does definitely give it some bonus points for me because I can wear this in the evening, so that already gives me an extra plus point. Next up, let's talk about a foundation that is completely different to like all of the other foundations in this lineup, and that's the Lisa Eldridge Seamless Skin. Is that what it's called? Yes. I knew that was what it was called. Why did I doubt myself? But the Seamless Skin Foundation, the reason why I say it's completely different is because it's not a luminous, glowy, dewy foundation like the vast majority. In fact, just looking at all of the other foundations I'm going to talk about, my favorite foundations, they're all glowy, luminous or dewy. The Lisa Eldridge the Lisa Eldridge is definitely a satin. It's not a matte. It's as close as I like to go towards matte town, but it is a satin. So it's got this gorgeous, what it looks like to me is like any of these foundations, but having been set. So it's like a glowy, luminous foundation that has been set with powder, and it's just divine. It's so perfected, smooth, gorgeous, but looks like skin. It's just magic. Again, I'd say this is like a light to medium, but you can get a pretty high medium coverage out of this as well. It's not going to give you full coverage off the bat. It's going to take some building. It's very flexible. You can use a very light layer and have a very natural no makeup day, or you can build this up and I'd say you're going to be getting close to like a medium full. Very, very versatile. A beautiful foundation, feels divine on the skin, very lightweight, feels very hydrating on the skin, and just looks stunning. So natural. A lot of the foundations I use are like so luminous that they don't have like a skin-like finish. They're glowier than my natural skin is, for example. Whereas the Lisa Eldridge, it's exactly like skin. It looks so natural. If you're looking for the most natural finish here, this is the one. This has kind of become my go-to for evenings because, like I said, all of my favorite foundations up until recently had a high SPF. This has no SPF, and therefore I can wear it under like any circumstances. I can wear it on a day out, I can wear it on an evening, I can wear it on a super long day with the children because it wears beautifully. It sets itself. I've never felt the need to set it. It doesn't transfer, it doesn't move. It photographs stunningly, flash or not. It's stunning in photographs. This would be, if I was getting married this year, this would be my wedding foundation. It's so reliable. It's never let me down. Again, incredible shade range with incredible undertone options. I have a perfect winter and summer match in this foundation. It's just gorgeous. It is slightly less glowy than I wish it was for my personal preference of a foundation, but I can also mix in some illuminators, some liquid illuminators, some liquid highlight to get it to the place I like to get it to. But obviously that's an extra step that I have to do in order for it to be like my perfect finish. But everything else about it floats my boat, tickles my pickle, gets my heart pumping, you know? But very hard to compare it to really any of the other foundations in here because it is so different as far as finish. Just definitely way less glowy than my other favourites, but it is absolutely my favourite not glowy foundation. Next up, let's talk about the Chanel No. 1 foundation. This is the foundation I have on today, and I am loving this foundation. It is a gorgeous, I'd say light to medium coverage foundation. It's just divine as far as the finish. It's very, very flattering on lines and wrinkles. It doesn't soak into lines at all. My smile lines, it stays completely out the entire day. Very flattering, incredibly smooth. I said that in my review. The word of the day was smooth, possibly the smoothest foundation of this whole bunch. Very flattering, very youthful, which is exactly what this No. 1 range is designed to be. As far as my understanding is, it's like youthful skin bottled, and that's what this is. Fresh, juicy, the perfect level of luminosity, just gorgeous. I'm obsessed. This may be my new favorite. Between these two, I'm kind of trying to work out which I like the best. They kind of have pros and cons between the two. The Chanel No. 1 doesn't wear very well on me. It gets a bit too shiny on my forehead. Everything else is fine. It doesn't disappear. It doesn't wander off midway through the day. And we're probably talking 5, 6, 7 hours before it's a little shiny on my forehead. So we're working on that. I don't want to have to set a foundation in order for it to look beautiful and wear well enough. I don't ask for a lot. I'm not working a double shift for 15 hours running around like a maniac like throughout the day. I don't live in really extreme temperatures, cold or hot. So therefore, I feel like my foundations, and I also don't have very dry or very oily skin. So for me, I expect an 8-hour, pretty flawless wear from my foundations. Otherwise, I can't say they wear well, because if they don't wear for 8 hours on me, imagine someone with an oily skin type who lives in Vegas. Imagine. So that's how I benchmark things. I expect a foundation in a moderate climate that has no extreme temperatures or weather in general, on a normal skin type. The foundation should be wearing perfectly on me for 8 hours. Otherwise, it's all downhill from here. So this one there's a slight question mark over that. I need to give it more chances, because I do feel like the day that I did my real attention to detail wear test with this, I did go to the gym, and I'm not sure if I caused that. I also went into a swimming pool. It's obviously very, very humid in there, and I was like mask on, mask off, and it was like a trying day for a foundation, as much as it gets in my life. So I do want to give it more time to actually see on a normal day when, you know, nothing extreme happened, how does it wear then? So there's a bit of a question mark over wear time, but it certainly isn't like a long wearing foundation. Many of these aren't really, I'd say, other than the Lisa Eldridge and maybe the Clé de Peau. Most of these would require setting to make it beautifully to the sort of 8 or 9 hour mark. But this is probably the least like long wearing of all of these without being set. So that's the kind of the negative of this one. The other negative is that I feel I want a medium coverage most days. That's kind of what I'm going for. That's where the sweet spot lies for me. I want a medium coverage out of my foundations, but I want a medium coverage where I still look like myself and I still like look like skin. I don't look like skin. My skin still looks like skin is what I'm trying to say. But it's evened everything out. It's evened out my redness and discoloration. And I feel like it takes me a huge amount of this foundation to get there. I can get to a medium coverage, but I still can see redness. So it's not great at like balancing out or evening out my skin tone in comparison to all of these other foundations. So that's just something to know. It definitely does it, but I feel like it takes like 5 or 6 pumps, a lot of foundation, a lot of building up to get to where I get far easier with the Charlotte Tilbury, with the Clé de Peau, with the Shiseido, with all of these other foundations. This one I use a lot to get the medium coverage, more unified, evened out skin tone. But when I get there, it's worth the journey. Let me tell you, it's stunning, gorgeous, glorious, beautiful foundation. Also, one of the few, again, with no SPF, so evening friendly, photographs beautifully. It doesn't dry down it doesn't set itself. So if you want no tackiness, if you want something that's not going to transfer, you will need to set it. So that's just something to note. And now, last but by no means least, we come to what you guys will know if you've been here before is the holy grail. For me, it's the Tom Ford Shade and Illuminate. It's probably just about clinging on to top spot for now while I'm still working out my thoughts on some of the newer foundations. But there's definitely some contenders for top spot. Definitely the Chanel No. 1 is a contender for top spot, and the Charlotte Tilbury is a contender for top spot. The others, I'd say, because they are very, very similar to this one, and this one has always been my favourite. These three, the two Clé de Peaux and the Shiseido, they all have SPF. They're all like a similar coverage, similar finish to this one, and I've always preferred this one. So these aren't going to beat out the Tom Ford. And again, the Lisa Eldridge, because it's just not as glowy as the Tom Ford, I can't prefer it to the Tom Ford because this one just has it. For me, when it comes to how a foundation looks, this is just it. This is how I want to look every day of my life. The perfect, very natural medium coverage, the perfect finish. The luminosity in here is just perfect. Some foundations are a bit too dewy at times. I want to set them, or it's just too much, or they get too shiny throughout the day. Or like the Shiseido, it starts off a little too satin and then gets glowier. This foundation with a very small amount, a very thin layer, is a very watery foundation, a very liquidy, thin foundation. I use a very small amount and it evens everything out. It gives me the most perfect glow and luminosity and fresh look to the skin without ever being too shiny or dewy. And it starts perfect and it ends the day 8 days later. 8 days later? Calm down. It ends the day 8 hours later looking exactly where it started. That perfect balance of luminosity that's not too flat and it's not too shiny. It stays in that sweet spot for exactly where I want it to stay without being set all day long. For such a glowy foundation, it wears incredibly well. I have perfect shades again. I love the packaging. It's just exactly everything I want in a foundation as far as coverage, finish, feel, amount I have to use, etc, etc, etc. However, there is one big large but coming, and it isn't mine. SPF 50 in here, 50, the highest SPF of all of these foundations. It's such an annoying thing about this foundation. I wish that wasn't in there, and then I could never need a foundation ever again, but it is, which means I cannot wear this in the evening. I can't trust this if I'm going out for drinks, if I'm going out, if I'm going on date night, if I'm going under any circumstances I might want to take photos. But that is the biggest shame about this. Can't wear it in the evenings, can't wear it at any kind of event, even though this is exactly how I would want my skin to look. So that is the big and really the only negative about this, apart from the price. I guess it is an expensive foundation, but I'm happy to pay more to get like what I want from a foundation. I don't mind that, but I do mind the SPF because it does mean that I just can't wear it in a lot of scenarios. Whereas the Chanel and the Charlotte Tilbury, they have that extra thing that the Tom Ford cannot give me, and that's a nighttime appropriate foundation. So that is the thing that might eventually bump this bad boy off top spot, but I do need to experiment more. These are kind of the ones I'm still playing around with because they are the newest to my collection, and I still need to really solidify my thoughts on them, but I can tell you I love them. They're beautiful. The negatives that each of them has as far as, you know, the wear time, we might be able to work that out. Hopefully I'm going to see an improvement with that, but also I don't need a hugely long wearing foundation. Like I said, you know, there's very few days where I really need a crazy long wearing foundation. And then I've got my Lisa Eldridge. That's the one I will go to when I want a long wearing foundation. So if you wanted a top 5 from me right now, I think the top 5 would be the Charlotte Tilbury, the Chanel No. 1, the Tom Ford Shade and Illuminate, the Clé de Peaux, and the Lisa Eldridge. This would be my top 5 right now. Hard to put them in a specific order, like I said, but we're working on it. We're working on it. Obviously, the NARS foundation, the News NARS foundation, I don't have as yet at the point at which I'm making this video. It's due out here in the UK any day now, so I will be giving you my thoughts on that as soon as I have it. And maybe that will be the one. Maybe that will be the one that will gazump all of these. You just never know. You never know. That's the exciting thing about makeup. New things are coming along all the time. And when I'm ready and when I'm sure and when I'm certain, I will give you a ranking of my top 10 foundations. But the time is not yet. We have to hold our horses, be patient, and wait. Wait for the right time. Wait until we see a sign, or just until I work it out. That's what we're waiting for. So there you have it. That is everything I have to tell you about my favorites and the newbies. I hope you found this video helpful, and I'd love to see you in the next one. Otherwise, take care for now. Bye.